What is your future, Emma? Okay, so the card that's come up is adventure is waiting for you.
That's a good one. I like that. Hopefully it's a playful and joyful adventure in schools, because
That's it.
I'm on a mission.
You are on a mission. You are on a mission. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this mission? Because it's so important. It resonates with so many of us.
Yeah, okay. So my name's Emma. I am the creator of the Cool Curriculum. My background is in primary teaching and early years teaching. That's my passion. But I've also been a head teacher for over a decade. And through all of that time, I was really passionate about children having ownership, choice, autonomy in their learning, really have that buy-in. Lots of play-based learning, lots of continuous provision, which I know we'll sort of talk about a bit later, but that was always been my passion. And throughout all of my jobs, teaching, headship, leadership, I led across a large mat, sort of the early years team. That's always what was really important to me. And in sort of the later stages of my headship, I created basically a curriculum that was based on the use of continuous provision, so play-based learning in Key Stage 1. And I wanted to find a way to help other people to access that. For me, I guess pulling it down to a nutshell, we have over, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, really seen a formality come into Key Stage 1, particularly. I think it's across primary and probably secondary, and some of it's possibly post-COVID, but I think it was definitely happening before, where our classrooms are being pushed into conformity, lots of control. We've got knowledge-rich curriculum, which is it's kind of heavy. It's heavy for children. It's very fact-based and knowledge-based, and we are seeking children who will comply with teacher direct input, for a large part of their day. And for me, that's just not how children learn. And the work that I'd done before, I'd seen it come alive, and I wanted to share this with other schools. So across the last couple of years, since I've been working freelance, doing all sorts of things, consultancy and writing early years curriculums for people, the bit that I've always really wanted to try and do is figure out, how do we make Key Stage 1 more joyful, children who are more engaged in their learning, loving their time in school, and that it's not early years curriculum, but that we're pulling the best bits out of early years, because I think we've got so much to learn from that part of teaching. And like I said, it's where I love to be. So that's where I'm at now, is trying to the mission is change the delivery model for every single, or as many children in Key Stage 1 as we possibly can, and give teachers and leaders the tools and the framework to understand what that looks like, because that's the barrier. Many of us know that play-based learning, children who are joyful and engaged in their learning, that makes a difference. We know that stuff, but we don't know how to do it. And in the midst of SEND crisis, system complexities, accountability measures, assessment, all that stuff that's going on, we need a roadmap to do it. So that's what Cool brings, and that is the mission. It's about changing that pedagogy.
And there's so much in there about challenging what we see at the moment and having clear steps to help everybody that's involved in education, right from the senior leaders, the governors, senior leaders, down to the practitioners that are in the classrooms with the children, and working together to make sure that the children are, as you say, engaged and have that autonomy. And I think, there's so much passion that comes through, Emma, in the way that you delivered what you've just said. And I was wondering whether, if you wouldn't mind, just taking us back to that moment when you decided you felt the calling to go into education, because it really is a vocation. I do believe that.
Probably when I was about 4. There were definitely words bandied around like bossy in my household.
Really?
It was strong leadership from the start. I was the child who used to play teachers and set up my teddies in a row and get the blackboard and teach them. And I see it in my own children now. So there was probably that in me from the start. As a child, I was always buddied up with other children to help them and support them. So yeah, it was probably in me from an early age. I think the actual decision to go into education probably came late secondary school, when I was trying to decide what the heck I was going to do with my life.
Yeah.
And did some work experience in a special needs school. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't really know what I want to do necessarily, but I want to work with children and young people. And I was always really drawn to sort of like that preschool, early years age.
Yes.
So that came through. I ended up doing an education studies degree, thinking maybe I'd go into I don't know, ed psych or speech and
Yeah,
language or something. And then did some more work experience in schools and just loved kind of that preschool reception. They're just so magical and hilarious. I would
they are.
cry laughing. Kids are just brilliant. So yeah, and then ended up doing a PGCE. So yeah, I think it was probably always in me. It probably took until my late teens to figure out what I would actually do with it.
Yeah. And you've said it there actually that children are just, and the environment, the atmosphere in early years. I mean, as we've said at the start of our conversation, me being in that sort of setting now, the energy that they bring, the magic that they bring, they're so open to playing naturally. All they want to do is put on the costumes and be different characters and tell stories. And yet, as you've said, there seems to be that formality that comes in, that the expectation is then that that stops. And we are now, getting to a point where preparing them to sit behind desks. Can you just explain a little bit how continuous provision works in an early year setting for those people who are listening who don't know exactly what it is or what it looks like?
Yeah. So I think continuous provision is like play. It's more specific, but in the sense it's complex. So there is no definition of play, there is no one definition of continuous provision, and it can mean different things for different people. Whenever I work with schools, the bit that I always try and clarify first is, what does it mean for us in our work? Like, I have a definition of what it is to me, but what do they want it to be? Because there's lots of different versions, and you kind of have to clarify that first. When I'm working, I use a model that I created called the CAPE model, because I think it's a superpower. And so we just use that kind of acronym to help us to pull it together. And C is for continuous. So for me, if we're talking about continuous provision, we're talking about resources being available in a way that's continuous for the children. Like, they need to be able to access and revisit those things. If we just put something out for one day and they get to pick, but then we take it away, that's not continuous. We're not talking about them accessing it like all the time, but there has to be things that are available to them over time that they can repeatedly go back to. So that's the continuity bit for me. And then the next biggest part of it is autonomy. So the A stands for autonomy, that children need to have choice. If we're having provision is resources, the environment, the setup. For it to be good continuous provision, they have to be able to choose. If we've got a Lego box over there and a writing table, and we tell them where to go, that's just an activity. That's not continuous provision. They don't have any autonomy and choice. And then the P, there's two P's and an E, they stand for provision. And that's like kind of a big meaty bit around what does that actually look like. Ultimately, what we're talking about is having high quality resources and a high quality setup in our environment that can lead children's play and learning, and that it marries together. So in a nutshell, that's where I'm at with it. In
No, that's
earlier,
so helpful.
I guess we're more used to seeing that sort of provision in earlier settings, like nurseries, preschools, reception
Yes.
classes. That feels like the norm. My belief is that classes right up to year 6 and further can have that sort of setup. It looks different, but it's really it's powerful.
And what I started to think there when you were explaining that, because in the setting that I work in, they have little work in progress cards. So the children will be playing with something in the morning. They'll have built something, for example, a track or a building or whatever it is. Then they put the work in progress card down, and all the children know that somebody is working on that or working in that area. And then the children go off and they go to their specialist lessons, or they go and do phonics or whatever it is that they've got planned in the day. And then the children go back to that when they have their continuous provision slot, so to speak. So that's a really easy way for everybody in that space to know that everybody's working in their own way on their own thing. And it's lovely. I love walking around and seeing all the different stations, as it were, with these work in progress. It's gorgeous.
That's about perseverance, isn't it? That's about giving children opportunities to come back to and to revisit and to persevere with their learning. I think when we really look at what we do in schools at the moment, we shut learning down. We compartmentalize it into, it's half an hour here, it's an hour here. And actually, as adults, and when our young people become adults, that's not how we work. I mean, I try and time block, but I'm rubbish at it because I get into something and I just want to, you get on in the flow and you want to keep going. And I get that we have to have structures in schools. Of course we do. We need to have those things. But what you've said there is coming back to that idea that actually, if we have play and continuous provision opportunities in our classrooms, we enable children to show their capacity to work for longer and their perseverance. And if we look at the research, that's what it tells us. If we give children choice and autonomy and ownership over their learning, we set up environments that work for them, they'll develop better perseverance, they'll engage for longer, they show focus, they'll focus for long. Like, these are things we want, but they're not really things we necessarily, I don't think, try and encapsulate in the classroom. We don't think about them enough to make sure that they happen.
And as you were talking there about flow, creativity is such a big part of your work. And, for those creative thinking skills and creative problem solving, collaborations, all the creativity is such a big part of this provision, isn't it? And we need it. And this creative flow, I mean, you said just a moment ago about the fact that you go into a project and you want to work on it for longer, and you go deeper. And I think the problem that some people might see is that we've got a very broad curriculum, but we have the breadth, but we don't have the depth. And I think what continuous provision provides is, what I'm hearing is that ability to go deeper. Would you say?
Yeah, I agree. And I think with the curriculum, we have to be really mindful and step away from it sometimes and look bigger picture at what it's really, if we're talking about national curriculum, English national curriculum, what it's actually telling us. Because I think we overcomplicate it hugely in this country. The amount of schools I work with, and they just add to it because we see this, like, I've got an hour for science, right, I better fill it. I've got an hour for cooking, I better fill it. And we're filling it with knowledge, adding knowledge to children. Whereas, exactly as you said, if we just pulled out the core points we do need to directly teach them, children do need direct teaching. We know that that's impactful, but it's got to be prioritized and short. Their attention spans are little. Then by offering them that time, that space, I mean, gosh, don't we all want a bit of time and space? That, you're exactly right, by exploration they can go further with that learning. And we talk in the core curriculum about things like side quests. Like, why does it all have to be so tunnel? Does it all have to be we have to go on this journey together? Or actually, can we value and bring in children's passions and their own interest to things, the things that they're absolutely fascinated with? Or, I don't know, they've got a cousin from another country. Can we give them space to go off in the parameters of what we're working on as a bigger whole, and actually go on their little learning side quest adventures? And the organisation of a classroom through a continuous provision approach absolutely gives them the environment and the setup in which they can do that. Because I think a challenge for educators is that they feel they've just got so much to do. And the idea of personalising learning is like, but how do I do that? Well, if we flip this over and we actually put that in the ball court of the children and say, look, here's this space, you have freedom, choice and trust to go and explore in a way that makes sense for you, that pressure's taken off our adults. The children can do that. They're born to learn. I mean, look at them in early years and reception. They've got it nailed. They need us, of course, to move things forward, but they don't need us to challenge them at times. They will do that for themselves. They, like you said, they will be creative. They will follow those little interests. We just have to create the environment, the structures and the trust so that they can go off and do that.
Absolutely. And I think there's two prongs to this, my thinking at the moment. One is the role of the educator in those situations. So what do we need from our educators to ensure that the learning takes place and that it's child-led? And you talked a little bit about this at the start, about training. And the second prong is the space, the actual physical space. Because if we want to take this continuous provision through Key Stage 1, classrooms are not set up like this, are they? Generally speaking, I know that's a general statement, but there's a lot more shelving, desks, chairs. There's lots and lots of things, a lot more children in one space. Like, how would you advise or help the educators in that situation and to make sure that the space is conducive to that learning? What do you think?
Well, my take on it is that anything's possible. I think the first step is to step back and have an honest conversation about what we want to get out of our year, term, week. What do we want for our children? Because we're blinded at the moment, I believe, by curriculum knowledge, and that And that is all we focus on. And when we look at, I mean, you think about accountability, we're judged on this huge wide range of personal development, cultural capital, all of these things. Yet really, when we look at classroom lessons, they are focused on knowledge being fed to children. So where is all that space for the other aspects to come in? Like, where do we create that? And I think we have to take a really brave step back and say, right, the knowledge is important. Let's make that prioritized. And then in our classrooms, what else do we want? I mean, there's lots to talk about. Metacognition and oracy at the moment.
Yes.
Rightly so, we need problem solving, creativity. We need those things and we want those things. So how do they marry with the knowledge and the learning? And therefore, what do we want our classroom experience to be like? And I think that is a massive question, a big chunk of discussion for leaders and teachers to be thinking about, because I think we've gone down this road of those lessons becoming a certain way, very teacher-led. And if we step back and think, what do we want for our learners? What experience do we want? What broader picture learning do we want for them? And then we can think about, okay, well, how do we set up our spaces to give them those opportunities? So let's just take something like oracy and talk. In order for children to develop in their language, we know we've got a big problem with communication language in the UK. I mean, it's a global issue, but in the UK. So we're probably going to need to give them more opportunities to talk. Okay, yes. So how could we set up our classrooms to give them more opportunity to talk? And that doesn't just mean next to a talk partner that you're talking to the same person all the time. That's not it. That's building emotional relationships, learning to listen to others, getting the sense of who else is in our space. Like that's oracy from a two-person conversation. But when we look at that bigger picture. And then I think when we've got that sense of what do we want, like oracy, and we want creativity, and we want problem solvers, and we want people who can be kind to one another and can negotiate. Okay, well, how many opportunities are we giving children within our space to do that? Because if all they do is go from the carpet to their set table space for the whole day, they never have to negotiate anything. And they don't talk. So, okay, let's think about that. Can we? I mean, there's some great people out there doing awesome stuff around, you look at sort of therapeutic classrooms, thinking about flexible classroom seating, the work of Tina over at Ebbs Primary School in Oxford. She did a really great kind of practice and saw what happened when she just took all the tables out of year 5 and chairs, and they just had flexible seating. I mean, it was far more complex than that, but they basically found that there was no impact on learning negatively. If anything, it was positive because the children were more engaged for longer, and socially huge impact. I've been doing a project over the last year with a school in Coventry, and that's what we found by having choice of where children go in the classroom. I mean, if you ever want to see a class who's got continuous provision working that are tiny, the classrooms are tiny and they make it work. So I believe anybody can make it work. Then, those children move around the space, they negotiate, they talk. 75% of their session is spent in purposeful talk because they're given the space to do it. And they're constantly moving around. Who needs to share what? They tidy up like nothing I've ever seen before because they're just used to doing those practices, and they have such trust and autonomy. And it's so powerful to watch. They've pushed elements of continuous provision into their year 3 classrooms now. And again, tiny spaces, but what they're seeing is, and we call it like stored provision. So we're not necessarily setting up big zones and spaces in the classroom, but around the edges of the classrooms, we have got loose parts, craft opportunities, and children go and get it and bring it to their table, or get it and bring it to the carpet. So it's a different version of it, but it still brings in those core principles around children having choice, autonomy, ownership, being able to talk, using their creativity, being independent. And that's it, I think. Step back and think about what core principles are important. And I think we've got a mismatch at the moment in so many of our classrooms. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it did. And when you're talking about children being able to talk to each other, listen to each other, negotiate, compromise, collaborate, problem solve, time manage, these are all of the skills that we teach in drama and dance and the arts, and yet we see the arts being taken out. They are nice things to have, a little bit like the same as play. It's a nice thing to have. It's nice to be able to go and do your drama class at the end of the day. But so many of those skills that you're talking about are embedded in that practice. Gripped work, analysing, interpreting, empathy for a character, perspective. So this is like music to my ears, but all of, but I see so many schools, as I said, taking these art subjects out, and yet they're the bedrock, I think, of so much of what you're talking about as well.
I think you're right. They're the vehicle. We've forgotten that, because then we get to a point where I mean, so many teachers say to me, oh, they're just not independent in year three. They don't know where to find a pencil and they won't do this. And I'm like, well, did you give them the chance in Key Stage 1 to do those things? Or did you sit them at a table where everything was in front of them and they never had to go and think for themselves? And actually, the research around like embodied cognition and active processing, as humans, we need to move to think. And I don't just
Yes.
mean that, little movement break. I mean, move purposely to go and get something.
Yeah.
If we think about how we were, if we're just sitting in one place and everything is available to us, that really limits our capacity to think through and be creative. Whereas when we
Mm,
have to go and access something, move, go and have a conversation, that lights up the rest of our learning. And I think that's what I mean. We've almost like it's complex, but we've simplified this sort of knowledge funneled into children as if that's going to be how they learn. But things won't go into our long-term memory unless we've processed them. Processing takes time, processing takes movement, and processing takes repetition. So I think it's around like 8 times we have to encounter something in order
yeah.
for it to go into our long-term memory and be embedded. Well, are we giving children 8 opportunities to learn and process a piece of knowledge or a skill? No, we're probably not, because we're rushing and we're just trying to cram everything in. And then there's lots of research about how, if we're just delivering knowledge, how long that takes to go in, how many times we have to repeat it. Yet if we do it through play, it's so much quicker, because these are the routes. I think these are the channels that we need to create to see this is how learning is going to happen in a much more straightforward way and a much more joyful way. Like, we've forgotten that school should be joyful. I saw someone post about golden time the other day, that it's kind of become this thing that it's only on a Friday afternoon and only for the children who've completed their work. And I just think, God, I want the whole of school to be golden time. I want children thinking,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I love school, I can't wait to go. And it's this beautiful, magical place to be.
Yes.
And
Oh
I'm just not
gosh,
sure that's how we feel
absolutely.
right now.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And that's not, there will be lots of days where children go to school. I mean, the other day, my little one came back, and we sit down and we have dinner and we go around and we say, what was your best bit of the day? And he turned around and said, school. So I know that there are days when he absolutely loves it. But we have also had conversations, and he says, I don't like writing. I don't like writing anymore. I said, oh, but you're always writing at home. You're always writing stories. You write stories with grandma. You create little books. Well, we do it a lot at school. And there's, part of me has to sort of say, well, that's what we do at school. We're practicing our letter formation, and we're practicing. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I know what he's saying. He just he wants to do a little bit of writing and then go off and do something else, or make sure it's purposeful, and they're not just sitting there going over and over and over the letters. It's really difficult. I think educators have such a hard job. There's so many different things. You've already touched upon it, that it's content heavy. It's really structured. We are accountable to, these children reaching certain milestones. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? How do we empower educators to follow their instinct and be playful and be creative and know that they can measure that play?
I think it goes back to finding out what you want for your learners,
Mm,
because I mean, I think play itself is so complex, and for me,
mm,
I use I'm a visual person, so for me, when I think about kind of play in the classroom, it's different to free play outside, and I think that's important. I mean, children need
yeah.
more play in total. In our country, we have a play deficit. Play poverty is happening for all children. We're not just talking about those who maybe come from disadvantaged backgrounds. We're talking about all children. So that's a big issue. But for me, I like to try and see it in the sense it's like a solids, liquids, gas thing in my head. So solids is how we currently are kind of teaching children in classrooms. Like, there's not much wiggle room. It feels crammed. There's no space to move around. And then liquid is like our free play. Sorry, gas is like our free play.
Yeah.
outside, playtimes in the park, do whatever makes sense for you, move your body, totally free. For me, that's not what classroom should be. Classroom should be structured. We want children to learn. We have knowledgeable, fantastic adults in there who are working their absolute socks off to make
Mm.
this learning meaningful for children. And I think we want this liquid in the classroom. We want to see this flow of this opportunity for educators to interact with children take learning off in their own direction, but we have to create the parameters for that. And that's, I think, the difficult bit is we need to have a sense of what do we want children to be doing and learning in their classrooms. And once we know that, then we can measure it. So if we go back to the idea about talk, okay, we know that for
Yes.
these young people, having lots of opportunity to talk, that in their play or in their learning is going to be important. So let's kind of set a benchmark of what do we think would be appropriate, and then we can measure that. If we say, right, we really want them to have opportunities to, that their PSED, their personal social emotional development, is poor, they've come up from early years and they're finding it really hard still, so we want to give them opportunities to do that and practice that. Okay, we can measure that. How many opportunities? What are the things? We want them to be resilient, we want them to persist, we want them to, when their bridge falls down, keep trying. Like, if we can be specific about those things, then we can measure them. I think
Yes.
and we can learn from early years in this, because the early years curriculum puts a high priority on those prime areas. So communication,
Yes.
language, personal, social, emotional development, and physical development. And then somehow, not that we forget it in year one, of course we don't, but we then go down our subject specific pathways. PSED becomes PSHE, which is not the same
Yes.
thing. Like, there's great learning in our PSHE curriculums, but it's not the same. It's not about self-regulation and how we manage and what happens, to our bodies. It's different.
Yeah.
And I think we need to think more about, in our Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum, where is that space for learning, but also just trying things out. Like, it's not always going to be the teacher telling you how to negotiate.
Yeah.
That's not how you learn how to negotiate. You learn by
Failing.
having a bit of a fight in the role player with your mate, and then
Yeah.
figuring it all out and making up, and then working out next time, actually, we'll use a sand timer to share it. That we learn by
Yes.
experiences and doing. But I think we have to step back and be clear about what we want.
Mm.
And sometimes that means being brave and squishing the curriculum knowledge to a point where it's, of course, coverage, and we want breadth and depth, but let's look at all this other stuff we actually want for our children, and how can we measure how that's happening in the classroom. I mean, the school I work with in Coventry, the assistant head is called Ellen Parker. She's absolutely incredible, and our project looked at children's wellbeing and involvement, because that was important for them as a school, and we wanted to measure that. So we used the Leuven scales, which are great. It's just a way of 5 scales for each, one for wellbeing and one for involvement, and they have a little kind of descriptor, and we just tracked, because we want children who are happy and well and feel safe, because we know if they don't
Yes.
have that, they're not going to learn. And we wanted them to be involved, not at a busy, shallow level, but at a deep involvement, engage in their learning
Yeah.
level. So we use those scales, and we track the children from the end of year 1, because they were going from a continuous provision in year 1 experience. And then we track them all the way through year 2, because they had continuous provision in year 2 as well. And in some other studies, that wellbeing involvement scales drops as they kind of go up year groups, because for many reasons.
Yeah.
But theirs grew through year 2. And is that not what we
Yeah.
want? We want children throughout the whole primary career and secondary to develop and grow in those wellbeing and involvement levels. So, that's one way I think we can measure what we're doing. And I think we can learn a lot from early years, about seeing that. But in order to find the time for that measurement, we have to kind of strip out some other stuff, because I think they're measuring all the time, and sometimes we're not
Yes.
measuring the right stuff.
And I'm hearing there as well the friction almost with wanting to make these changes at the lower end of the school, so early years going to year 1 into year 2, so Key Stage 1, and the friction with what is expected as they move through the school and go into secondary. Because, people who are perhaps on the fence about continuous provision might say, well, they're expected to sit at desks at year 3, year 4 upwards. If they don't have time to practice doing that, then they're not going to be able to focus in lessons. And I suppose the other challenge that we have is trying to inform parents about the benefits of this, right?
I mean, I think I would say I disagree with the fact that practice. I mean, you don't get better at sitting still by sitting still. Like, that's not how you get better at sitting still when you're little. You get, and why do we need to sit still anyway is a bigger question, but you get better at focus when you've given your body the physical development that it needs. So our children need to develop their core strength, they need to develop their shoulder strength if they're going to write, they need to develop their posture,
Dexterity.
they need to develop the nervous system pathways, which is all about their balance, if they're going to then feel safe enough in their body to feel okay to sit still and focus. Again, I'm not sure what, but there's that sense.
No, I know, it makes sense.
I think it's not, we have to again take a step back and say, okay, by secondary school, and of course we want children who will focus, is the way to get focus practicing focus all day long? No, the way to get focus is getting buy-in and engagement to what we're doing, so that children naturally are just enthralled. I mean, how many times have you had that, something comes to the classroom and the kids are just like,
yeah,
of course they're going to sit still and they're mesmerized,
wide eyes.
So finding the engagement is going to be the thing that helps them to focus. Developing their buy-in is going to be the thing that helps them focus. They need to feel that they matter in this, and that they're deeply engaged in their learning. Like, why is this important? How many children go, I don't know why I'm learning that? And secondary school is, at fault there, definitely. I think this stuff goes through to secondary school as well. And we know that we need to, in the same ways we as adults, we need to divvy up the amount of focus they have. Like, if I go to an all-day training CPD, I am exhausted at the end of the day. And aren't we all? We go, oh, it's so hard to focus all day long.
Yeah.
So focus comes
we need movement breaks.
Well, movement
and have conversations.
Physical, right. So I don't think we're thinking about it right. Focus. Teaching children to sit still in year 2 is not the thing that's going to help them in year 6. Teaching them to negotiate, to talk, to choose how they're going to learn, that's going to set them up better. Choosing them that they matter, that their creative mindset is actually really valuable. We wonder why we've got so many young learners who are really struggling. Their confidence is low. They don't believe in themselves. They think they're useless because they don't have the opportunity to show that they can be worthy in lots of different ways. And I think, that idea of like writing, does everything have to be writing? Why aren't we valuing when children present and talk and say their ideas, when they create a piece of art? Like, in COOL we use the phrase many ways of knowing and showing, and we value that. It's not, writing is not the best way to show some things. It's just not. But we seem to have gone down this route of saying if it's not written down, you don't know it. Well, I know plenty of children who write something down, they haven't got a flipping clue what they've written. They don't know it. But then other children who, bless them, they can't write it down, but oh my gosh, they have such a good sense of where everywhere is in the UK and the capital cities. And that, again, that's stepping back and going, what's important here? Knowledge, that quote around knowledge, learning is the residue of thought, right? So how are we giving children opportunities to think in our classroom? Writing it down can help, but it doesn't always. So I think it's about stepping back and thinking, is this what is going to get us what we want for our young people? Because I mean, my children and children I've worked with in my schools, I want them to be healthy, happy adults who can communicate, who can build relationships, who pick themselves up when they go to a job interview and they don't get it, who know that when they hand an assignment in, that's the first draft and it's going to come back to them and they're going to have to keep going and keep going. Like, we need these ideas. And I mean, that idea of creativity, where are we giving children chance to practice and grow that? Or are we just shutting it down?
Well, I mean, yes, a lot of people would say we are shutting it down. I mean, something that I really struggle with, and have always struggled with working in formal school settings, because I was freelance before. So I'd have long day projects or half day projects working with schools and children and young people in lots of different settings. But the school bell, I bloody hate it, because we will be in the flow of creating something. The children will just be on the cusp of getting a project together, or creating a scene, or getting an idea for a script, or developing a character. And then the bell goes. And it's, I suppose, going back to what you were saying, it is frustrating when that happens. Yes, it's frustrating because we've lost that creative flow. But next week, we're going to come back to that. And the challenge will be to try and reignite that energy for that project, for that idea that you had, or build on it. Maybe you've, over the course of the week, you've had other ideas that have come in. Have you made a note of those? Bring them to the lesson. And, you'd be walking through the playground and, oh, miss, I've had an idea about that. I've started writing the script for it. It's being able to come back to an idea.
Yeah, and it's
And
also
that it not
trying
being
to
shut down.
find that space. I mean, the schools that I work with Cool or other kind of projects, is that that's what we're trying to do. We try and find space in the timetable where children can flow in and out of. And Cool particularly, we flow across subjects, so we don't have one set science. We have input that is specific around subjects because we still have direct teaching through the framework, but we have opportunities where there's a block of time and children can choose, I'm going to work on my science, I'm going to work on my history, I'm going to work on my art. And they might do a couple of things across that Cool session. Or
Yes.
actually, they might be in the flow, and for a whole week, all they do is that science because they're really into it, and they come back to it, and they come back to it, and come back to it. And then that's kind of their bit of their learning. And then the next week, they go, right, okay, I'm going to get onto the art now. But I think, there's a lot we talk about, learning styles are not a thing anymore, but
Yes.
preferences are.
Yes.
Preferences and strengths are still a
Mm.
thing. And I think, again, we narrow it down that it has to be one certain way, whereas actually some children really get into it and want to carry on with that. Some have subjects they love, so let's start with that, and then we'll bring other things in. I'm a procrastinator, I need a bit of thinking time before I get started. Do we create that space that actually sometimes learning and thinking is quite still and it looks passive, but it's not. We need that, that processing time is important. If we're going to be creative, we need time to watch, to look,
Rest.
to think. And we rush in our the way the curriculum is often delivered, we rush from teacher
Yes.
delivery to, right, now write it down, or now
Do
create
it.
something, do it. Whereas continuous provision gives us the opportunity to explore and to think and to deepen and to test ideas out. And of course, we still want recorded pieces and
Yes.
expectation around knowledge, that's gone into our long-term memory. We want those things. But
Mm.
I see that magic when I work with schools where children are given this space and you can look across the classroom, and it's that quote from Birth to Five Matters: learning is not like stepping up a ladder, it's like a ballroom dance, right? And that's what it's like. Teachers who create that environment for the ballroom dancing, you then look
Mm.
across the space and children are in the flow doing their own little thing, and we can pigeonhole them into that child has a send need and that child has that. You can't
Yes.
really tell when they're in continuous provision. It's not
Isn't
very
that
obvious at
beautiful?
all because they are able to learn in a way that makes sense to them and make those choices. I have so many children in the projects I've done in the last year who teachers are saying to us they wouldn't be in the classroom if it wasn't set up in this way. They wouldn't be able to cope with the formality and the pressure
The
of that,
rigidity.
the demands.
Yes.
But because they can access things in a way that makes sense to them, we can still challenge them, but they are safe in this space.
Yes.
Current system in the UK for inclusion and send, if this is a way that we can help teachers to make spaces where children can be and can learn, let's do this.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about the core curriculum, what I'm hearing is that this is a framework that schools buy into and kind of trial and experiment with, and you lead the educators and the school leaders through that process. Is that right?
Yeah, a framework is a really good way to describe it, I think. There's kind of two versions of it. One is bespoke, in which we work with schools' own curriculum. We kind of restructure it for them. We train them. We help them to understand, how do we deliver this curriculum, which has usually got some great stuff in it.
Yeah.
How do we deliver it through continuous provision? But it is a very structured framework. So planning structures are there. How the environment is set up is very kind of organised, working within what people's settings look like. But as I say,
Yeah.
do it in the tiniest of settings. And then how we step through, how we monitor, how we record, how we assess is all kind of packaged in a framework, because that's exactly what heads have been saying to me and teachers. We're really passionate about play and we want to do it. We just don't know. And what was happening was kind of early years ideas and resources were coming up into year one and year two, but they were not meeting the national curriculum.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely a framework for people to work within, that guidance to help them to go through it. And yeah, lots of training and support. And I'm learning as we go along. We've got 5 trial schools at the moment this year who are working with us, because I wanted it to be, I've done it before, but I wanted it to be co-created. So they are
Yes.
feeding in and helping us with this project to build. What else can we do to support schools because sometimes it's just little stepping stones.
Yeah.
If we're not ready for full on continuous provision, I invite schools to step back and say, okay, cool is based on the choosing our own learning. So choice, ourselves as learners and people, ownership, and links to learning. So I invite schools to take a step back and say, okay, well, let's just start with something small. To what extent can children have choice in your lessons? Can they choose where to sit? Can they choose how they sit? Can they choose who they sit next to? Can they choose what colour paper they write on? Can they choose whether their learning about verbs is in a poem, a story, or a poster? These are little teeny weeny steps that sound like, yeah, but what's the point? I promise you, when people try those little tiny things, the point is we get engagement, we get motivation, we get buy-in, we get focus for longer, we get orosity. You know, the outcome is big, the steps might be small. And there's lots of ways we can do this. You know, cool is one of them, but there's so many other people out there doing and trialing really great stuff.
Yeah. And if schools want to get in contact with you and work with you, what, you know, because you've got the podcast and you've got like 3 core sort of avenues that schools can work with you. So, you know, where can people find you, Emma?
Well, I've got a website for Cool, which is thecoolcurriculum.co.uk. So come and find out there. I'm on
Yeah.
Instagram and LinkedIn, so I hang out there quite a lot.
Yeah.
We're exploring opportunities for schools to work with us in the next coming year. But I also run sort of training and consultancy and bespoke projects with schools. So yeah, ping me an email. There's contact details on my Cool website, or also I have another more early years website. So yeah, come and say hi, and we can kind of find out what works for you. I interestingly do lots of training for leaders around early years practice.
Yeah.
Because again, that's often a gap. We have lots of leaders who would openly say, "Oh, early years practice is not in their zone of genius." So yeah,
No.
do that. But there's great other people out there. I've worked with kind of Chartered College, and their Rethinking Curriculum project is great if people are looking for just. Sometimes it's about opening the door to say who else is doing things a bit differently.
Yes.
So Charter College is great with their project. You've got Hayley Peacock doing things around Reggio Emilia, really exciting stuff. There's a national play and education group, which I sit on the board of and help, and we're mapping out just opportunities to connect schools together who are looking for playful ways of learning. The creativity collaboratives, I don't know if you check in with them. There's a kind of a Cornwall, it's like the Penryn project.
Yeah.
They've got loads of case studies on their website with schools, action research project where schools have just tried little things, and that's what we need. We need teachers who are going to be brave enough to just say, hey, in this one little nugget of time, I'm just going to try
I'm going to try
something,
that.
see what happens. And they've got that website, they've got like a whole structure of how we can measure creativity and the different stages and what we can look at. So there's so much out there it's about time, right? But there's so much out there if we have the time to have a little look and explore. And often I think when we arm ourselves with some of that knowledge around what is out there, what are other people doing, that gives us that little bit of bravery to say, okay, I'm going to try it and see what happens, see what the impact is.
Because I think reflection and learning and collaboration it's just so hugely important, you know, opening your mind to other possibilities and being brave. You know, you've talked about this a lot in our conversation. It's about being brave, but not brave taking forward steps, actually being brave to step back and look at the bigger picture and reassess and review. And that, I think that's such a big part of being creative. Actually, it's looking at a project from a different perspective and having conversations with people that perhaps change your mindset or change your view, or, you know, just the juiciness of it.
Yeah,
So the possibilities are endless.
You've had Kate on the podcast
I
as well.
have.
Kate from What If Education, her the book that's coming out, Ordinary, is going to be a beautiful
Can't wait.
way if people are looking for like a stepping stone into opening up children's discussion and like awe and wonder in the world. And she's doing fab things. So there's lots of people out there in the space who are exploring it. And I think it's just about, like you said, connecting and pausing for a minute and thinking, what do we want out of this, and how can we step forward?